Chains, Chapter 17. What with my busy night as a true spy, code word and all, the heat up in the upper gallery of Trinity Church, I fell sound asleep during the sermon the next morning. I woke up when people around me stood, so startled that I popped up from the pew and nearly toppled over the railing. The next 2 days were long and hot as I awaited word from Colonel Regan. Master Lockton did not notice that the list of co-conspirators was a little hand-worn. He was too busy visiting the mayor at his home in Flatbush and spending hours at his warehouse reviewing his accounts. Madam took her meals upstairs. Only Becky was allowed to serve her because Madam's fear of the demons she claimed inhabited Ruth. Becky said Madam sat sighing by the window and shuffling a deck of playing cards over and over. We did not bother keeping Ruth away from the milk, of course. Instead, we kept one ear open for the thud of Madam's feet on the stairs. When she approached the kitchen, one of us would whisk Ruth down into the cellar. Ruth understood none of this. She did not complain about the egg-sized lump on her head or anything else. After we finished our business in the privy each morning, I took her to check our mystery garden. The green shoots were 2 hands tall, but gave no clue about their identity. It was perfect growing weather, especially for flowers and corn and strawberries. It was perfect weather for going home. I practiced a code over and over until it felt like a prayer in my mouth. Add a straw, add a straw, add a straw. I was desperate, but dared not to leave Ruth alone in the house with Madam Lockton. The thought of Madam putting Ruth up to auction was a constant torment, like bees darting in and out of my sight and daring me to swat at them. The gossip from the market was fantastical. Becky brought back tales of sea monsters chasing the British fleet and 2-headed calves born outside of Philadelphia that portended all manner of disaster. Folks were prickly and fearful. Loyalist shoekeepers had been tarred and feathered by angry mobs and their shops destroyed. Each day dawned hotter than the last before. Add a straw, add a straw, add a straw. 2 mornings after my meeting with the colonel, a visitor pounded at the kitchen door. I was kneeling on the other side of it, polishing the lock with an oily rag and a rotten stone. The voice near gave me apoplexy. When I opened the door, I was shocked to see not a messenger, but the rotund figure of Mr. Goldbuttons. Instead of wearing a hat or a coat, he had a long cloak draped over his head and a wig that sat askew. He stormed past me towards the stairs. "Is your master still abed?" he shouted back to me. "Yes, sir." Goldbuttons dropped his cloak on the floor and ran upstairs as if his breeches were on fire. A moment later, Master Lockton bellowed like a stuck bull, then thudded heavily across the floor and yelled for Becky. The plot to kill Washington had been uncovered. I was sent to fetch Madam home, for she had gone to call a friend. Goldbuttons had vanished by the time we returned. Madam hurried to the library and told me to fetch her ivory fan from her bedchamber, for she was feeling faint from the heat and excitement. As she opened the door, I caught a glimpse of the master pacing frantically, his nightcap still on his head. He looked up and saw us. "Thank heavens! There is much to do and no time. The worst has happened, and—" I started up the stairs to fetch a fan, moving slow as possible to overhear the words. "What is the meaning of this, Elihu?" demanded Madam. "Listen carefully," Lockton interrupted. "The rebels know. I've sent for a cart. We must burn my papers." "Dear God, protect us," Madam prayed. "How do they know? Wait 1 moment." I took the steps 2 at a time, and was near the top when Madam stepped into the hall and pointed at me. "Forget the fan, girl. We need firewood for the library. Now!" Lockton and Madam were exchanging heated words across his desk by the time I brought an armload of wood and a few coals from the kitchen into the copper coal carrier. They seemed to not notice as I walked in. "You're abandoning me?" Madam asked. "You'll be safer here." Lockton dumped a folio of papers on his desk and rooted through the mess. "Aunt Seymour isn't leaving, and we have credit with all of the merchants." "Your aunt despises me," Madam said. "You You must stay to defend our name and our honor. I arranged the wood so that it would not catch quickly, set the hot coals underneath it, and leaned forward and blew gently. I'm guilty, Anne. They won't give me parole this time, but as soon as the rebels are driven out, I shall return. What if they arrest me? Madam asked. Let me go with you. You must stay to keep them from stealing all that we own. Madam picked up the blue china snuff jar on the desk and flung it against the wall. It shattered and left a mark on the plaster. I will not, she shouted. I will not be left at the mercy of our enemies while you slink away. Despite my best intentions, the kindling wood caught hold of a spark and burst into flame. Master Lockton crossed the room to pick up the keys that had been hidden in the jar. He placed them in his pocket, then, without warning, hit Madam with all the force in his arm. She flew into the bookcase, causing several books to tumble to the ground. I almost reached for her, but I was afraid to anger Lockton any further. I command you to stay here, Anne. This is your duty, and you will obey me. He turned to me. The fire is satisfactory. Leave us. Yes, sir. As I closed the door, Madam started in again, begging him to take her with him, or at least to let her know where he was going. A carpenter soon arrived, and nailed the master into the large crate marked cheese. As the final boards were being put into place, Lockton told Madam that he would first head north, then to Dr. VanBurr's house in Bergen County. 3 men loaded the heavy crate onto a cart driven by a man that I'd never seen before. Becky tended to Madam's battle wounds with ointment and medicinal wine. I offered to fetch Lady Seymour, but in truth I planned to run the news of Lockton's escape to the rebels as fast as I could. Madam insisted we all stay in the house with the doors and windows locked. She passed the night burning packets of papers in the fire and demanding gallons of tea and fresh biscuits. When the soldiers arrived at dawn to arrest the master, his business papers were all ash, and the crate of cheese was long gone. The angry soldiers tore through the library, but found nothing save for shards of the snuff jar. These they stomped under their boots until they departed. Becky went to the market and left me to clean the mess. She returned with a freshly killed hen and a basket full of beet greens. Before Becky could remove her bonnet, Madam shuffled into the kitchen. What news? Madam demanded, her eyes red, perched above dark rings from a sleepless night. A livid purple welt had raised on the left side of her face where Lockton had struck her. Most of the bruises on her arms and shoulders were hidden under her gown, but she walked stiff and sore as an old crone. Becky gave her the gossip from the market stalls. Conspirators who plotted against the Americans' cause had been arrested all over the city in several close-by villages. The mayor, 2 doctors, a shoemaker, a tailor, a chandler, a gunsmith, a drummer, and a fifer were all charged with treason and a host of other offenses. How did they uncover the plot? Madam asked. I picked up the beheaded chicken and carried it to the basin. I held it by the feet so the last of the blood could drain out before I plucked it. Becky hung her hat on its hook and pinned it on her apron. One of the co-conspirators flapped his mouth, and the story poured out. Hickey is his name, a tall Irishman who served in General Washington's Life Guard. Did anyone mention Master Lockton? Only that he was one of them that got away, ma'am. They caught one fella trying to cross the East River. Couldn't row hard enough against the tide. The master is well out of harm's way. Which is more than I can say about myself, Madam muttered gingerly, rubbing the violet bruises on her wrist.